Welcome to Creepy Joe's Horror Show! With special guest, Slip Rick the Skeleton.
It's not my fault the babes like me, man.
Also, Flo! And don't forget about your legendary loser host himself, Creepy Joe!
Welcome to Creepy Joe's Horror Show. Tonight we have Interview with the Vampire from 1994.
Interview with the Vampire, 1994. The story is told to a young reporter in San Francisco in the 1990s by a vampire recounting his life of darkness.
This is definitely one of my favorite movies. It's definitely, it's a 90s movie, which I was young when this came out, almost a teenager, so it was a good era to see this movie at that age, I guess. And it was, you gotta understand, like, this was the age of MTV, so MTV glamorized this movie as well. Like, it was just a really, like, this movie, The Crow, movies like that in the early 90s were just, they were the most popular movies out there. And I didn't realize it at the time, but this is definitely, I didn't understand it because it was a little bit in depth for someone my age, but I understood it fully, but I didn't appreciate the art and the poetry and everything that went into the writing. Anne Rice is amazing, and she obviously wrote the movie. Neil Jordan directed it, but it's phenomenal. This is probably the best vampire movie out there. Sorry, to all you, I know that that's a huge genre of horror, just vampires themselves, and but this is definitely one of my favorites. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big Lost Boys fan, but this movie was very serious, and it was a beautiful movie. It was done beautifully, and starring Tom Cruise as Lestat, and Brad Pitt, of course, as Louis, and you have Kirsten Dunst in there as Claudia. That was her first big role, I believe. But Christian Slater, Daniel Malloy, he's the guy that interviews Brad Pitt, and that's how the whole movie is told. And then you have Antonio Banderas as Armand, and there's a lot of other actors and actresses in the movie, of course, but those are the main ones. And at the time, in the early 90s, these were the biggest stars out there.
Have you said your goodbyes to the light?
I mean, every single person, outside of Kirsten Dunst, who was just becoming popular, and she went on to be more popular in the early 2000s, but this was an all-star cast. I mean, it was crazy. This film had a $60 million budget, I believe, and it was a really big deal of its time.
Louis!
I'll just say, okay, so the basis of the movie in a nutshell is, Brad Pitt, Louis, he lost his wife, and he's, devastated. He's only 24 years old, but in the 18th century, at 24, you were a man with a lot of responsibilities, and he owned a plantation, and he was very rich and well off, so...
Things were different then. I was a man at that age, the master of a large plantation.
His wife died, and he basically was just blowing all his money on poker and hookers and...
I'm calling you a piece of stinking offal!
Alcohol, and he kind of wanted to die. And Tom Cruise, Lestat, saw him out and about and knew that he was willing to die. And so he turned him into a vampire. And that's where the movie kind of starts. And then, you know, there's so much to this. You know, this is such a phenomenal film. Like, of all the movies that I've reviewed this entire month, you know, even if you're not a big horror fan, like, this is a great movie. So like this, I would recommend this over all. But it's just so well done. So basically, like, they're survive. You know, Brad Pitt's struggling with the idea that you have to kill humans, and you know, Lestat just goes around murdering everybody. He's, you know, like a kind of like a snob. He only wants to murder certain rich people or certain tastes. And you know, and Louis is struggling, thinking, knowing that you can survive on rats and animals, and he doesn't want to kill anybody. But then he ends up actually fighting Claudia because the plague took her family, and so she was left all alone. And then
One of you did it! Which one of you made me the way I am?
Lestat knew that Louis was trying to run away from him, so he made Claudia into a vampire just to keep Louis around because he knew he'd fall in love with her. And then those three go on throughout the movie, and it transitions through times. You know, it starts out in the 18th century and it ends in 1994. So, you know, Louis is really curious about like who made him and everything, who made Lestat, and he's trying to find like the original vampires. And he finds out they're in Paris, and that's where Antonio Banderas, his character Armand, is. And Claudia and Louis try to escape Lestat. You know, he's just a murderous. You know, he's crazy. You know, and they want to live a little more simpler, and they're not as sick and as demented as he is. So Claudia actually takes him in a dead body and lets him sink into it, and it brings him down to almost death. And then he comes back. It's like probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. He comes back in the piano scene. You know, he crawled out of the swamp. He said he was surviving off like toad blood and crocodiles for a while. And, you know, he comes back like this, you know, decayed vampire. And it's a pretty cool scene.
Out of the blood of snakes, toads.
But eventually, after Brad Pitt and Claudia break free from him and go to Paris to meet Armand, and he has a whole slew of vampires. They put on live shows. It's really interesting, and they actually kill people on stage, but you think it's an act. So that's a pretty memorable part of the movie as well. And the visuals in this movie are just insane. You know, it's not like, you could tell it had a good budget. It wasn't cheap. It was done very well. The costumes, everything was like on point. Like visually, this movie's amazing. It's one of the greatest that I've seen in horror anyway. I mean, there's not much bullshit going on in this as far as like CGI or anything. And where they do show blood, it's pretty graphic. You know, there's some graphic stuff. This isn't a slasher film, but like Brad Pitt, when he's avenging Claudia after that group of vampires kill her, he runs through like 30 vampires and cuts their heads off. You know, it has its moments where there's some gore and some stuff going on, but it's more of it's a very good story. It's a horror drama, so it's not a thriller that's you're on your toes all the time. But it's so well done that, I can't say enough about it, obviously. I'm like, being ridiculous about how great it is, but it is.
A very, very naughty little girl.
So, ultimately, I guess I skipped the most important part. The whole reason the story's being told is because Daniel Malloy, aka Christian Slater, is, I believe he's a journalist or something, but whatever. He's interviewing Brad Pitt, Louis, and he's telling his story about where he started and everything. And
So you want me to tell you the story of my life?
Like I said, that's what I do.
Christian Slater, Daniel Malloy is the character. Christian Slater doesn't really believe him at first, and then he realizes that he really is a vampire, and he ends up wanting to become one at the end. He's like asking Louis if he can become one, like if he'll make him into one and everything.
And at that age, the master of a large plantation just south of New York.
He got really mad, he got really mad at Christian Slater for even wanting to be one. And then that's where the interview ends at the end. And then when Christian Slater's driving away, he gets, Lestat, Tom Cruise lands in his car and, bites him and turns him into a vampire, right? That's what you're led to believe, I believe. Either that or he just murdered him. But, yeah, so that's a very, very shrunken, balled up piece of crap version of the movie. Because this movie is 2 hours and some change long, and it goes very in depth. It's beautiful. It has everything that a serious horror movie that tells a story should have, And if you don't watch this movie, of all the reviews I've done, like, this is the one that I would say is probably the most well done of all of them. And I'm gonna give it a solid 4 out of 5. A lot of people would say 5 out of 5. I don't know what the Rotten Tomatoes is on it because I don't look at that stuff, but I'm sure it's pretty high. This is a very well liked movie, and that's pretty much that. So every movie that I'm doing this month of October, I can't even remember what night I'm on, 21 I believe, or 21. Every single one of these you can watch on Tubi for absolutely free. And I made sure the ones that I'm watching and reviewing, they're not like on their way out yet. Like they don't have a time limit. Like they'll put a tag if this one has 6 days left. All these are going to be readily available, I hope, all month. I would think it's getting towards the end of the month now. So you can still see all these movies that I did all this month. And absolutely free, just have internet connection and download it. You can watch them on your phone, whatever. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Sorry that drug on a bit. That was, like I said, that was summed up very quickly and shittily. I mean, it's way better than that, and there's a lot of really memorable scenes in it other than what I said, but you can see it for yourself. Go check it out and stay creepy.